ABC-11 Eyewitness News presents Heart of Carolina Perspectives.
Hello, I'm Angela Hampton. Welcome to Heart of Carolina Perspectives, ABC-11's Community Affairs program. Today we're looking back 50 years to a very significant time in our history. In 1963, the Civil Rights Movement was punctuated by demonstrations across the nation. The historic March on Washington took place in August of that year, culminating with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivering his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. That speech and march led to the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which outlawed racial and other forms of discrimination. But before those events, the city of Durham was making history on the civil rights front, ending segregation at the majority of restaurants, hotels, and theaters in the city. Today, we're hearing about how it happened from a man who was at the forefront of it all. Wense Grabarek was elected mayor of Durham in May of 1963. He's in his 90s now and is sharing his memories from his first few months in office. It was a time filled with high emotion, volatility, and ultimately a cautious trust and cooperation that began the road to racial equality in Durham. Take us back to that time in mid-May of 1963, right after you were elected. There were mass demonstrations that were going on in Durham. Tell us about that time and what you observed.
Yes, and I'm grateful for this opportunity. On Saturday, May 18, 1963, we had a municipal election here in Durham, and my opponent was Mr. Watts Carr. The election was held, and fortunately I won by a rather comfortable margin, and that was on Saturday the 18th. And on Sunday the 19th, I was having dinner at home at about 6 o'clock, and the phone rang, and it was Chief Pleasance, Chief of Police, and he said, someone had better get down here. He said, we have a riot situation on Main Street in front of the jail at courthouse area, and somebody needs to be here. And when I got to Main Street, the entire street was full of people. On the left side, on the courthouse side, jail side, were the black constituents, and on the right side of that white line that centered the street were the white folks. Let me mention this, that in the crowd, it was a very ominous atmosphere. I saw baseball bats, I saw broomsticks, I saw the heavy end of a Q-tip, a billiard cue, and I saw the broken end of a beer bottle. And the situation was just terribly horrific to me as to what could happen if that spark of provocation occurred, and it could have come about at any moment, any time, just someone misreading someone's motion with a club or something. And I walked down to the front of the courthouse building and stopped, and I said, who's in charge here? And the unanimous response was, we're all in charge. And I said, who can I speak to tell me why we're here? And then a few of the fellows got into a huddle there and said that it was a Mr. Hugh Thompson. And I said, where is he? And he says he's down in front of the jail entrance there on the west side of the building. So first of all, let me mention how delighted I was to hear the name Hugh Thompson, because we were not friends, certainly, but we knew each other. I finally found Mr. Thompson at the entrance to the jail, and I said, why are we here, Mr. Thompson? And he got together with a group of his people in front of the entrance there, and they came back and said that they had come with sandwiches, boxes of sandwiches and cigarettes for the people in the jail. Mm-hmm. The city had arrested, according to all reports, about 1,400 people. The jail was jam full. Mm-hmm. These people had been visited the Howard Johnson restaurant on Chapel Hill Boulevard. And
trying to be served.
Trying to be served, demanding service, and none was given. So the law being what it was at the time, the police put them on the buses and brought them into the jail, and the jail was full. Well, these good people who were gathered there told Mr. Thompson to tell me that they had cigarettes and sandwiches for the people who were in the jail, and no one would let them in. Well, now that made sense from the police standpoint. You can't fill the jail up with awful lot of people and so on. Some would have to run to jail. So I paused a moment and I thought about it, and I said, Chief, give me 2 policemen. And I asked Mr. Thompson for his group to gather all the sandwiches in one box, if as best they could. There was a larger box there. And the cigarettes also. And for them to name 2 people, we would send in that way. They named their people, gathered all the sandwiches from the different boxes into one, and the cigarettes into one, and we sent them inside. And they went in. It took quite a while. There were a lot of people in there, and they came back out, and it seemed to work fine. Everybody was happy. So I told Mr. Thompson that it seems to me that our mission has been accomplished here, and there is no good that's going to evolve from this mass gathering that we have in front of us, but trouble. So if you'd be good enough to say a few words to your people, then I'll speak to please ask them to disperse, and see if that won't resolve the immediate crisis that we're facing here today. So he made a very nice talk. And I want to give credit to Mr. Hugh Thompson, because I don't know that his name is ever mentioned in regards to this particular incident, but his presence and his voice were extremely important to the city of Durham at that moment.
When Heart of Carolina Perspectives returns, we'll continue our conversation with former Durham Mayor Wense Grabarek, and we'll hear from a local historian about how business and civic leaders decided to desegregate 50 years ago. Also, see the historic rally that set the tone for negotiations and got the nation's attention. Stay with us. Welcome back to Heart of Carolina Perspectives. I'm Angela Hampton. Today we're looking at a tumultuous time in our nation and our state. 50 years ago, the civil rights movement was demanding the country's attention. There were demonstrations for racial equality in cities across the South, and Durham was no exception. In the spring of 1963, activists organized the largest mass protest Durham had ever seen. Demonstrators demanded to be served at segregated restaurants. Arrests followed, prompting what police called a near riot situation outside the courthouse. But violence was prevented in large part because the newly elected mayor of Durham, Wense Grabarek, met with protesters and promised to address their concerns. A national network news program covered one of the initial meetings in May of 1963 at St. Joseph's AME Church.
You know, at this particular time, when there's an argument, as some of the men say, argument going on between you and the city of Durham, it's an achievement of some kind, and it marks, I believe, without knowing him, I've never met him before tonight. He was nothing except a name in a newspaper to me. But it marks, it seems to me, the man with whom you are dealing as head of the city, when he comes out to a meeting to listen to you state your case and plead your cause in your kind of language before your kind of folks with no holds barred and no pull punches. That kind of a man has to be honest.
I personally believe that Durham, the people of Durham, are making progress with Durham's problems. Yesterday, at 10 o'clock in the morning, I assembled some of the business and civic leaders of Durham to look at this problem head on. After 2 hours of discussion, it was decided that your mayor should appoint a committee to meet with any groups that have grievances concerning civil rights in our city. A citizen, all citizens, all colored, all white citizens, have a responsibility to their government. And so at this time, as these negotiations get underway, I sincerely pray that you will give to me and the government of this city your cooperation and your full understanding at all times. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Nearly 50 years after that meeting, Wense Grabarek sat down with me to talk about the group he formed to address racial inequality in the city. It was called the Durham Interim Committee. Mayor Grabarek appointed civic and business leaders to serve and asked his opponent in the election, Watts Carr Jr., to be chairman. A local historian says Mayor Grabarek was very strategic in his selections.
He was quite aware of the importance of the personalities who could, as we say, get the job done in terms of bringing about a quick closure of this matter.
I named 9 white people and 2 black gentlemen. And I might just insert here that I was criticized very highly by the black community because I didn't understand the problem. How are you going to resolve something 9-2? You just don't understand what we're up against. I saw it just the opposite. To me, this is a moral issue. And if morality is going to decide which way we're going to go as a community, morality better be put on the table and discussed, and primarily with those who will be the ones to make a change if a change indeed is to be made. Harvey Rape ran the cafeteria on Main Street, Harvey's Cafeteria. Very popular gentleman. Everyone loved Harvey Rape. He was a very religious man, a likable man, and very strong for segregation, to the point where just a month or 2 before the moment we're talking about, he got his rifle, cradled it in his arms, and dared a black patron to enter that cafeteria. No one ever did, of course. But he was so highly respected and loved that I knew, Grabarek, you must have Harvey Rape on that committee. And so I had a chat with him, spent about an hour with him, and he said, I will call you tonight. It's 11 o'clock at night. Finally, the phone rang. It's after 11. And these are his exact words. My shirt is wet with my tears. And a pause. I have just come in from the woods. Mr. Mayor, I will serve. That was a very principled moment in putting my committee together. That he found it within his conscience to participate in the resolution of the problem, which he had extremely strong feelings about just weeks before.
Wow.
I need to mention another gentleman called me and said he wanted to see me, Jimmy Warren. He was the owner and operator of Turnage's Barbecue place out on Maureen Dairy Road. And he said he wanted to chat with me, and we came in and we're talking about the restaurants. And it got to the point where I said, Jimmy, will you serve them right now? And Jimmy Warren said, that's why I'm here. And this was terrific for me because his restaurant is located away from the downtown, where we could try something without having a tremendous uprising in the meantime if it failed. And he had actually gathered 2 or 3 other restaurants out there in West Durham to go along with it. That yes, they wanted the mayor to know. So I said, will you serve them right now? That's why I'm here. We had a meeting at St. Joe's Church. I told him, I asked him to send 2 people to Turnage's. I will stay here with you, and we'll see what happens. They sent the two young men out there. After a while, they came back. We quizzed them. Did you enter turnages just like anyone else? Yes. Did they seat you like anyone else? Yes. Did they take your order like anyone else? Yes. Did they serve you? Did you pay? Did you leave like anyone else? Yes. Tremendous applause. And Mr. Warren's action, in my opinion, had tremendous influence on the ultimate result of the overall restaurant committee. It's okay. See? Now that action that he brought about, as I look back, it gave me a lot of credibility with the black community that maybe this mayor can get something done. Mm-hmm. See, mm-hmm. We did it.
Right.
So to summarize it, all the committees came back and successfully, if you will, to voluntarily desegregate the city of Durham. This was just within a few weeks. And if you'll allow me, just to be sure that I'm not saying this after the fact, I brought one. This is on June the 5th of 1963.
Mm-hmm. And this was published in the newspaper.
This was in the Durham News.
Uh-huh.
This is the theme I wanted to spread across the community. And it reads in this case, excuse me, I believe most of you will agree with me that the days of inaction are past. The time is here for us to re-examine our moral, social, and economic consciences in the light of present-day conditions and circumstances. When we do this, we think in terms far greater than ourselves as individuals. We think in terms of our fellow man. We think in terms of our immediate community, our state, and our country. We think in terms of our God.
What's interesting is that, you know, he was not a Southerner. He was from up north, as they would say. And so I think he saw things a bit different from other Southerners. So I think he was the right man for the right time, I think, who came about with some ideas that were unique. And I think that had they been practiced throughout other parts of the South, I think things would have gone a whole lot differently than they did in certain places.
When Heart of Carolina Perspectives continues, we'll talk about the holdout that threatened desegregation efforts, why Durham's movie theaters refused to integrate, and how a school teacher made a difference. Welcome back to Heart of Carolina Perspectives. 50 years ago, business and civic leaders in the city of Durham made history. Responding to pressure from the black community, the majority of restaurants and hotels in the city agreed to desegregate. It happened more than a year before the law required it. But there was one major challenge. The movie theaters were holding out, refusing to accept black patrons, citing violence at theaters in Atlanta that had tried it. But Durham's newly elected mayor, Wense Grabarek, had a plan. It involved a woman by the name of Bessie McLaurin. Here's the conclusion of our conversation and more thoughts from a Durham historian.
Miss Bessie McLaurin was known as the mother of the civil rights movement here in Durham. She was a woman who really had a keen sense of relationships. And so you'll see that sort of play out.
She was a school teacher in one of our black schools. And she would sit at those meetings, and she just had that aura about her, like she's in thought. She didn't say much, but she was very thoughtful, and you had to kind of respect her presence there. And it occurred to me to call her. And I called her, and I said, "The subject I'd like to discuss with you." "What is it?" I said, "I need some help with the theaters." She said, "Fine, but I'll have to bring some students." I said, "Bring anyone you want." Mm-hmm. So they met in my office. And I made the suggestion that what I'd like to do is to have you good people to give me the names of some people who are willing to go to the Center Theater. And believe me, it's still ringing in my ears. The resonance was, we're not second-class citizens from the student group. And they were not about to cooperate with me, anything like that. But as time went on, Bessie says, I think it's worth a try. They were wonderful words under the circumstances. And they finally agreed with Bessie McClung. So Bessie would give me the names of 2 people who would go to the Center Theater at 7 o'clock, 4 the next night, and 6 the next night. I repeat, they agreed to that. She gave me the 2 names. They came by, very fine dressed 2 young men. In the meantime, I might mention that I had arranged for plainclothes policemen to monitor all this, just so what happened in Atlanta wouldn't happen in Durham. They went to the theater, sat, enjoyed the show, left like everyone else fine. Bessie McClung arranged for other gentlemen to go the next night. Everything was just fine. After the second night, all the managers called me. They said, it's okay, everyone is welcome. So Durham desegregated within 8 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
Applause from around the world. To put this in historic perspective, this happened months, and please I don't want anyone to misread this or read too much in it, but this was months before the King I Have a Dream speech. City of Durham. City of Durham. It's more than a year before you had your first Civil Rights Act, July 2, 64. This is what the City of Durham had done. And so I feel like historically that's worthy of note.
It could easily be said that Durham was a powder keg, waiting to go off. And so I think, as a leader, he was tested, before he was even sworn in. And that's a mark of a true leader, one who's able to convince people to look in a direction and not necessarily tell them which way to go, but at least, guide them in a way that helps to alleviate some issues. So I think he deserves a lot of credit in terms of that.
It was brought about by notable participation, both races. The composite heart and the conscience is brought together. I would say that our diverse togetherness gave light to our soul. This identified Durham as to who we really are. Those moments should never be forgotten or erased. I would hope and pray that they would be used as examples and emulations to resolve and reconcile any future challenges that confront our beloved community.
There was more to my conversation with Wense Grabarek that we didn't have time to fit into this show. It's important to mention that he is very grateful to civil rights leader Floyd McKissick Sr. for his leadership during that time. On a personal note, I'd like to thank Mayor Grabarek for sharing his memories of part of our community's history and for all his efforts when he led the city of Durham. Thank you so much for watching Heart of Carolina Perspectives. Have a great day.